because it's really puts together a lot of thoughts that I've had in my personal life without having knowledge of these teachings. You know, just hearing stuff. You always hear the karma. Everybody knows karma. But do we?
But do
yeah.
We've always wanted to know, why are we here? Where are we going?
Always. This is it.
Thank you.
It's the question to relieve all anxiety.
Yeah.
The answer was relieve anxiety from
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
I will.
Hi.
We all get that.
Well, thank you.
no.
I needed a little caffeine this afternoon.
Yeah, no, sure. Turn off your phone.
Oh, yes.
My phone doesn't really have to
Airplane
charge.
mode. Or vibrate or whatever. Yeah, Deborah just reminded us. Are you going to introduce our?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's another one coming. What?
Oh, okay.
Kevin has to run home. He's not coming.
Oh, he's not coming. Okay.
Just me today. Next time he'll be here.
Okay. Hang on a second. Let me turn this thing off.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wait.
yes.
Sounds vibration. There's an easy way to do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Hi.
Is that Jean?
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on? Good to see you.
Oh, I lied. No.
Here, lean over and give me a hug over all these cables here.
I've been outside all day.
That's all right. I've been outside. You're warm. You are warm.
Yeah, I was checking out some vegan food trucks.
Okay.
I want to try to do my own thing.
Well,
So
That's cool. It's a nice surprise to have you in person. I thought you were going to be online with us today.
Is she
All right,
one
it's
that appears
2:30.
online a lot?
She hasn't. Well, yeah, she might have been online once or
I
twice.
usually do it
Yeah.
after.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because on
She reviews
Sundays.
You know, Jean and I recently did a yoga teacher training together, so now she's a certified yoga teacher.
Congratulations.
Yeah. No, none of the same place.
Where's yours?
I'm right now I'm a trainee at True Fusion.
Well, I got a
Yeah.
True Fusion.
Yeah. So I'm training at the Blue Diamond location right now.
Oh, I'm in Summerlin.
Oh, okay.
We have a couple of new people, so
Yeah. Kyle, do you want to introduce
Are we live?
yourself?
Yes.
we are live. Yeah. Okay.
My name's Eric.
Or Eric. I'm sorry.
Nice to meet you.
Meet you, Eric.
I am a new tenant here in the building. So me and my business partner have the first office here, a CPR training business.
Nice.
Oh,
Glad
All
to
right,
have
we're
you.
in good hands if
Yes.
we have a heart attack.
Ah, okay.
Do you serve food too?
We'll make sure they keep
Who's
the
that?
karma
Your
good.
secret?
No.
So Eric is here for his first time, and Jean is here for her first time. I know, Jean, I know you've had some exposure to these spiritual teachings because you had, maybe it was 12 hours of me lecturing during the teacher
Yeah.
training. So you're exposed to a fair amount of this. But Eric, have you had any exposure to spiritual growth training or teaching before?
I can't say that I have.
Okay, this is exciting then. Good. Well, apparently you have some kind of interest in what this is all about, or else you wouldn't be here.
Yeah, I'm just curious and interested.
Yes, Jillian's been here before.
Yeah, that's right. Last time.
Yeah.
I don't think you introduced her last time.
Well, we're glad to have you, Jillian. She and I did as well. Did another teacher training together. It was with Zeke Vincent. So glad to have you back. And she's the inviter of Ivan. That's how Ivan came to be here, was through Jillian.
Oh,
Yeah.
great. Nice to have you both here.
So we're online as well, just so everyone knows. We have a camera here and 2 microphones. So these are being recorded. And we encourage participation from our online viewers, as well as obviously us in person here. So please, we want participation. There is one caveat to the participation. We've had several requests that Terry and I do a better job of keeping the discussion on track a little bit more than we do sometimes. So if there is a comment, and this goes to our online people and to our in-person people, if there's a comment or a question, please keep it relatively concise and direct, and so we can stay on the topic at hand. With that being said, let's do a short meditation to begin. And usually it's a magic occurrence during meditation. We close our eyes, and when we open them, more people are in the room. So if that happens, don't be alarmed. All right, just get comfortable for a moment and sit tall. Allow your shoulders to relax. Take a couple of slow, deep breaths. Okay, the eyes will gently close. Make sure you're not clenching the jaw or furrowing the brow or tensing any muscles that don't need to be engaged right now. So just let the body relax. Let the breath be smooth and complete. We'll chant Om twice, once at the beginning and then once again after a moment of silence, and you're welcome to join in the Om. Inhale. Just a moment of stillness. Slowly begin to open your eyes. So the purpose of the bell, the chime, and the ohms is very simple. It's just to calm our erratic vibrations down and to just allow ourselves to focus a little bit, to unify, to harmonize, and to create one unit with one goal, one purpose, which is to learn, expand our knowledge and our wisdom about how life works, right? To make life a little bit easier, maybe eliminate some of the suffering we go through in life. That's the purpose of this. Calming the external vibrations so we can focus on something internal now. So we are thrilled to be here for our 11th session for this series. So
We're just starting chapter 7.
And just starting chapter 7. So it's this book that we're studying here, Theosophy, an Introductory Study Course. Chapter 7, so we technically didn't cover 100% of the material in the last chapter, but I believe two and a half classes we spent on the last chapter, which was reincarnation, we did a good job of encapsulating all the concepts. So it's safe to move along to chapter 7. And as we've said before, that all the topics do interweave with each other and interlace. So there isn't any chapter that stands completely alone. So we talked about karma during reincarnation, and we'll talk about reincarnation during karma, and we'll talk about the plan and purpose of life throughout the whole thing. And there is a specific chapter called the plan and purpose of life. So all the chapters counter support each other. All right, let's do this. Chapter 7, karma. All right. This is, I think I say every session, this is one of my favorite ones. But this is really one of my favorite ones because karma just explains so much about life. It gives us so much insight into why and how life works, right? What challenges that we come up against, what situations we find ourselves in life, and how to make things maybe a little bit easier for ourselves. So.
And as we pointed out in the classes about reincarnation, karma and reincarnation are twin concepts. You pretty much can't have one without the other because karma obviously doesn't work out the entire amount within one lifetime. It carries over into future lifetimes. So karma and reincarnation are like twin concepts in theosophy.
So it would be a lot easier and it would be more comfortable if we could see a cause and see the result all in the period of a few years or even shorter time than that. More like instant karma. It'd be easier. It'd be, oh, okay, so I did that and I got that as a result. That makes sense. Well, maybe I won't do that again. Well, certain things like that do happen, but there's a very specific purpose why a lot of these things don't get worked out. A lot of actions don't get worked out in the course of one human incarnation. There's a reason for that, and we're going to dive deep into that. So just generally speaking, it's a test for us to practice non-reaction and non-attachment, and also it's a test for us to raise our awareness and gives us the opportunity to analyze life and to see situations from a higher and different perspective, an unbiased perspective. You know that saying that you can't see the forest for the trees or through the trees, as some people say? Well, this is teaching us to rise above and see life from the perspective as one of the adepts would, one of the enlightened beings that give us these teachings would. So we can begin to see causes and effects and learn to not cause certain things that cause us pain and suffering later in life. So that's the reason that if causes and effects don't work themselves out in the course of one lifetime.
So what we're doing is trying to hone our analytical skills. Look at a situation and then glean more information from that so that we get some understanding. This causes this to happen. Even though the cause and effect may be separated by many, many years, we can still see it. You smoke, for example, throughout many years during your youth, and you may not see any ill effects from it, but perhaps you may even quit at some point. I had a friend who smoked for a long time and then quit, and 20 years later he got lung cancer. So we sometimes have to be particularly observant. We've talked many times about discernment, about seeing clearly. This is one aspect of that discernment, is to be able to see cause and effect and to reserve judgment in many cases until we have more information or until sufficient period of time has passed that we can make the connection. And even then, we should keep an open mind, be willing to reassess at any given moment when we have more data and more awareness, a better ability to observe the information and to revisit from time to time certain decisions or judgments that we have made temporarily.
And by the way, one of the reasons why we wouldn't be able to see any situation clearly, the main reason, is our own emotions. It's our own ego, which clouds our judgment and causes what in the spiritual tradition refers to as Maya, or illusion, in the physical world. It's because our emotions tend to cloud our clear vision. Gene, would you like to see one of these books? Do you want to look at one? We have some extras. Roger, where are the extras?
That's the only one I got, and I gave him one.
You don't have a box of extras?
We're out.
That's the last one.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good, I guess.
There's some more.
Oh, she has the
Yeah.
online version. Okay, the digital version. There are some other phrases that are used to refer to the concept of karma, which bring a little bit more light to it as well. And sometimes it's referred to as the law of cause and effect, which sounds similar to a scientific principle. And you'll see that it actually is. It has everything to do with action and reaction. So the law of cause and effect, it's also known as the universal law of harmony. And why do we call it the law of harmony? Well, there is a divine energy in the cosmos that pervades everything, according to these traditions, the yoga philosophy and theosophy. One energy, one mind, if you will, that pervades all of existence and is all of existence. And it's also referred to as the absolute. And this absolute, this highest reality that is, cannot be disturbed, cannot be taken off its center for very long. Now, we as human beings have ways to do that, because we have free will and we can do things that may not be in accordance with what might be good or bad. So whenever we do things like this that throw the flow off, throw the universe off its flow, the absolute counterbalances itself. So it readjusts in response to every human action.
It's called equilibrium.
Equilibrium, exactly, Roger.
So the absolute by itself has no polarity, it has no manifestation, it has no characteristics. There's nothing that you can actually say about it. But as soon as it manifests or creates something, you immediately not only have two aspects, polarity, whether you call it male and female or positive, negative, you have two aspects. There is immediately a third aspect, which is the interaction. So that's why the Trinity is such a stable factor in metaphysics, is because you cannot have just two things. You always have the third, which is the product,
the play or the dance.
Interaction. So that in itself creates some kind of a disturbance in this absolute.
Mm.
And so the law of harmony is the greatest law in the universe, because once you have any kind of manifestation, it will always have imbalance, and it will always, by nature, rebalance itself.
Now we're talking about very big, lofty concepts here that are kind of hard to articulate in words. Now, if some of this stuff needs some more clarification, please just ask, and we'll talk. We're talking about when you have manifestation. So if that phrase, when we have manifestation, isn't clear, we can talk about that, because we don't want to get too far, too non-practical here.
Yeah, can you be specific about that and give an example, please?
About manifestation?
Of the absolute manifesting?
So the physical world that we're in is a manifestation of the absolute. The absolute is here and beyond here. So in Indian philosophy, there's a visual representation of this. Brahma, which is the Lord or God that creates universes, he breathes out, and that's the expansion of a physical universe. And when he breathes in, that's the dissolution or the resting phase of a physical universe. Now, these are grand cycles that take trillions, Googles of years. Google is a number. That's what the word Google means, of years. Many more years than we can fathom, but that's so the manifestation of a whole universe, for example, or anything, the manifestation of our Earth, since we're kind of connected, we are connected with this planet in this solar system. That's really all we really have a grasp on as human beings. This world, when our planet was created and when life began to grow up here, that's manifestation of a certain kind. And it will expand and grow as we see life doing. Darwin teaches that, and then it will contract at some point, or maybe it will move on at some point. So it's the idea of coming into existence from seemingly nothing. The Bible talks about this too in Genesis. So when something is created, that's where manifestation occurs. Something physical, rocks and stones and gases and electricity, and there's automatically the interaction between the physical particles and products. And the interaction is where the Trinity comes from. So positive and negative, and then the interaction between the two. It's also depicted in the yin-yang symbol. So there's a circle, but the black and white doesn't have just a straight line in between. And one half of the yin-yang is not just white, and one half is not just black. If you notice, it's a squiggly, because there's a play, there's an interaction, and then in each side of the yin-yang, there's a dot of the opposite color, showing that there's an interaction. And that's this dance of creation, coming into manifestation and experiencing, doing things, having resistance, understanding, interacting, learning, arguing sometimes, fighting, growing through, learning from.
So the concept of the Big Bang is nothing new. It has been in existence as a philosophy in India, for example, for thousands of years, and even previous to that. So this is exactly as Paul said, that which was basically nothing more than potential at some point burst into existence, and worlds without number are created. And all of this interaction takes place for billions and trillions and uncountable years. And then it all retracts again back into seemingly nothing. Seemingly is the important word because it isn't nothing, and yet it acts as if it were nothing.
So a couple other points in the introductory section of this chapter. It's important to note that karma operates in the lower part of our nature, not in the higher part of our nature. So in yoga classes, I always talk about this idea of connecting your lower self to your higher self in yoga. And the actual etymology of the word yoga means union. And that's what it refers to. The practice of yoga is the work to unify our lower nature with our higher nature. So our lower nature is in manifestation to have this dance, this play between people, between humans and their environment, between everything in the physical world for this express purpose of learning and growth. Now, at some point, we will have learned a lot, and it's time to make the return movement home to our higher nature. So karma, it's important to know that it operates in the lower nature. So lower nature is the lower 4 levels of our being, and we've referred to this chart. I don't have it handy right now, but we have a chart, the Constitution of Man, that delineates the different layers of our being, the physical body being the lowest. So the lower 4, let's see, does anyone want to venture to guess what the lower 4, I know what it is, that's for you. Gene probably has it somewhere, but.
I think I can't find
it. So does anybody want to venture and guess what the lower 4 sections of our being are?
Sections?
Or levels, dimensions of ourselves?
Survival being the lowest.
In terms of our constitution, our makeup, our koshas, our bodies. So the physical body is the most dense, the lowest part of our nature, the physical body. Karma operates in the physical world. Then we have a body that's known as our energetic body or our pranic sheath. So karma operates with the type of energy that we create and perpetuate. Karma operates in the world of our astral or emotional body or vehicle. So the types of emotions that we think creates karma. And then the highest level of ourselves that participates in this karmic law is our mental body, or known as the lower manas. So the types of thoughts we think create karma for ourselves and for others. So nothing above that. When I say above, I mean nothing more spiritual than that participates in karma, but the lower part of ourself does. Okay. And that's the part that reincarnates. So from the lower mental body down to the physical body are the sections of us that die after the physical body dies and then reincarnates. That's the part of us that operates in karma. Anything else on that before we go? Okay. Every life form participates in karma. So it's not just human beings. However, so this is interesting. You probably haven't thought of your pet creating karma and receiving karma. But if you understand that karma is a law, like any other scientific law, inertia, momentum, forward and back movement, animals, of course, cause things to happen in life. If they jump up on the couch and bite the pillow and tear it apart, there's going to be a consequence, is there not? That's karma.
And they seem to know that too.
Okay, that's karma. Pets and animals of all kinds are trained with certain types of food dispensing systems where they can put their paw on one pedal and food will come out, right? Or water will come out and they'll be able to drink. This is karma, but it's a very different kind of karma than what human beings participate in. So we'll dive more into that. So animals participate in karma, plants do, and of course humans do as well. All right. Okay, another general concept in the introduction. There are 3 types or categories of karma. All right, and there are some Sanskrit words for them which we'll use to simplify, and then we'll simplify them after that. So we have something called Sanchita Karma. Sanchita, S-A-N-C-H-I-T-A. Okay, Sanchita Karma is it refers to the total storage of actions, causes that we've built up in our entire soul's life. So, soul's life, right? Not just your life. So this kind of requires an understanding of reincarnation as well. lifetime to lifetime, we do things, we cause things, we act, we have interactions, we have quarrels, we have fights, we do things in the world that need to be paid off, basically, need to be compensated or resolved or worked out. So things have been set in motion, especially when we're young humans. It's similar to a child when they don't have understanding of how the world works. They kind of fumble around, they fall, they break things accidentally, they try to put food in their mouth and they put it in their ear instead. You know, they don't really understand how life works. That's how we are when we're a young soul, a young human. Well, all these actions that we do are causing ripple effects in the absolute, in the universe, that will come back. And so all of the actions that we've done in our soul's life is what's referred to as Sanchita Karma. So it's like a big sack of stuff that we carry around lifetime after lifetime that we keep piling more vibrations into as we do them.
Now, with the karma, when we were talking about karma and or reincarnation, or we were talking about karma, or you were talking about karma, when you were a kid, you don't build it like until you're conscious of, right? So like after a certain time, right? Would you say that that is similar to adults? Because there's sometimes people can be naive or they just don't know any better, right? Like that's kind of how I try to go through life. Like this person did something mean, they really don't know any better, and that's the like. Are they creating karma even though they are naive?
It's a very good question.
Like.
That's a very good question. Go ahead. No,
Oh, okay. Yeah. Children, for example, don't really create personal karma. I mean, yes, they do have consequences to their actions, but they don't accumulate personal karma any more than an animal does. It's more kind of a different type of karma. By the time they're around approximately 8 years old, then they are able to make judgments about what is right, what is wrong, what should I be doing, what should I not be doing.
The age of reason.
The age of reason is called, and it really is a thing.
Okay.
So even though people who are perhaps less aware do the same things, they can be extremely intelligent or they can be not so very intelligent, and yet they are still held to a higher standard than a child or an animal would be, for example. So they will reap the consequences of that either in the same or in a future lifetime. Anything that they have created past the age of reason.
So yes, motive. So we want to make the point that motive is everything. If someone bumbles through life and hurts people inadvertently, there are consequences, but different kinds of consequences than if it was premeditated. That's why our legal system, our penal system, has different charges for different degrees of murder even.
Yeah.
If you intended to, it's very different than if you accidentally did. So a child might accidentally be creating karma, but usually that's kind of more of the instant karma nature where it will be worked out quickly. If they do something where if they spill their juice, their mom gets mad. That's the action and the reaction, basically. It's nothing longer lasting that they brooded over and premeditated and plotted against someone, which will cause a much different repercussion for them. Usually children that are 4 years old don't do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So then somebody who does have, like, as you begin to grow and start reading into the scriptures and start reflecting and you start doing all that stuff, is the karma that you create on a greater scale the more you know and deliberately do things that you know you're not supposed to be doing, in a sense, as opposed to, like, is that a greater effect in your... Okay.
Undoubtedly, yes. Now, can we prove that? No, but it seems to make sense that that would be the case. There's a phrase that Terry always quotes, to whom much is given.
From those to whom much is, and this is from the Bible.
From the Bible.
From those to whom much is given, much is required.
Okay. I like that.
Okay, so Sanchita Karma is the total storage of actions that we've stored. It'll be clear in a minute when we talk about all three kinds. Then we have the next section, the next set of karma, type of karma called prarabdha. 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 Okay. So since we've learned that in theosophy, in theosophical teachings and in yoga philosophy, we come to Earth many times in many different bodies, hundreds, maybe thousands of times. Prarabdha karma is the specific group or subset or section of the total karma that we are going to be working on in this lifetime. So it's the specific set of karma for this life. So last session in our reincarnation talk, we talked about what determines the circumstances of our rebirth. It's prarabdha karma, the specific set of our past actions that's going to set up the circumstances for this lifetime. To what, to who, which kind of parents are we going to be born to which socioeconomic situation will we be born into, which time in history, how much time is going to lapse before we're born again. And that can provide lots of different opportunities, whatever our higher self or the determiner, which is our higher self, determines for us what's to be worked on in this lifetime. And by the end of any particular lifetime, it's up to us to decide whether or not we resolved more than we created. All right, so if we created more than we resolved, that bag of karma we carry around, the Sanchita Karma, will grow. And guess what? That's the chakra, the Karmic Chakra, they call it. Does anyone know what a chakra is? You've heard the word before, right? Chakra. It literally translates to wheel. Karma Chakra means the wheel of chakra, the wheel of karma, bringing you back to life again and again until what? Until what happens?
Everything is resolved.
Until Sanchit, until you don't have that gigantic bag that we're working on anymore.
Is karma then negative? Is that all it is? Negative?
That's interesting. A negative karma? That's really cool. Well, yes, actually, there is kind of a negative karma, and that's the resolution of our past actions. If we can actually work through it and resolve it, then yeah, that would be a net negative addition.
No, what I meant is you're just talking about karma as if it is negative.
Oh, that's what you refer to. Okay. No, and we'll get to that next. There's a big section on that next. But let's get to the third subset. So we have Sanchita Karma, Prarabdha Karma, and then something called Kriyamana Karma. Kriyamana. Kriyamana Karma. So the word Kriyamana is a compound word. Kriya is a Sanskrit word that means to act or to do or to move. A kriya. Now a kriya is a movement or an action, right? So
and our word create is
there you go. Yeah. So it's actively creating karma. So creating new stuff that needs to be worked out in the future. All right. So in a lifetime, the Kriyamana Karma is any newly created problems that we set forth. It doesn't have to be necessarily problems, just anything that needs to be resolved. And yes, to Steve's point, yeah, it could be pleasurable as well.
Yeah, it can be, for example, attachment. You may have a love attachment to another individual, and it is so intense that you will reincarnate again and again until it becomes non-attached. You still have love, but it becomes at that point unconditional love, and there is not this emotional attachment any longer. It's pure unconditional love, and then there's no karma involved.
Don't need resolution, right?
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
But there will be a repercussion of it, and it'll be an equal and opposite action. So if you put out this unconditional love, guess what you'll receive? All right, this takes us to the next section, section 2, misconceptions about karma. And I'm glad we already brought up the idea of negative karma versus positive karma. So that actually is a misconception. Now, karma can't be negative and it can be because we label things good and bad, but karma isn't good or bad. It's just a reaction. It's a scientific reaction. Oh, yeah. Okay. I'm not a very good storyteller, but Terry wants me to tell a story of the Chinese farmer. Some of you have heard it. I'm sorry if I'm gonna bore you with this, but if you think karma can be good or bad, let's hear the story of a wise Chinese guy. All right. So once upon a time, in a land far, far away, Chinese guy owns a big farm. Let's see. How does this story go? He has a son.
Oh, I know.
You've heard it. I've told it in the teacher training.
Oh, I've read it in a book.
Okay.
It's in I think Eckhart wrote.
No.
Eckhart told it.
What is his name? I can't think of it. I'll think of it.
So the son assists his father in their fields and their crops. There aren't any other employees. What?
Yeah. Oh, well.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Did I mess up the story already? Go for it. You better tell us.
Okay.
All right. You better tell us.
So this older farmer lives by himself in this up in the mountains, wherever he is, and his wife died a number of years ago, and his only son went out into the world to seek his fortune, and he hadn't heard or seen him in many years. So every afternoon he would get together with some of his friends and they would talk after they got done with their work for the day. And one day he and one of his friends are sitting there at the end of the day and they see a figure coming up the path. And it turns out to be this long lost son of his. And they greet and hug each other, and his friends, oh, what good fortune you have. Your son is back. He can help you now with your farming, and it will be so much easier for you. What good fortune. Maybe yes, he says. Maybe no. Who knows? So the next day, the son is helping with all of the chores on the farm, and he forgets to latch the gate. And so the farmer's only horse, the horse he depends on to work the farm and to do the work, disappears during the night. And the neighbor comes over, oh, this is terrible. What bad luck you have. He says, maybe yes, maybe no, who knows? So the next morning they wake up, and not only did the horse come back, but he brought 7 wild horses with him. Now they have all of these horses. And the neighbor said, oh, what good luck you have. What good luck. You can train these horses and sell them for lots of money. Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows? So the next day they're busy working on training one of these horses. And the son, trying to ride it, gets thrown off and he breaks his arm. And the neighbor says, oh, what bad luck. Now, not only can he not help you train the horse, he can't help you. This is terrible. This is bad luck. He says, maybe yes, maybe no. Who knows? The next day, a regiment of the army comes through the area, and they're recruiting every single young man who is able to go off to war. Able-bodied young man. So obviously, with a broken arm, he can't be of any use to them, and they pass him by. The neighbor said, oh, what good luck you have. What good luck. The arm will heal, and he will be here to help you. So the story goes on and on. There is no end to this story. It's just pointing out that we don't see the final results of things. Another reason why we practice non-judgment. Even things that seem to be horrible in our lives sometimes turn out to be great benefits and a great blessing. So reserve your judgment and wait until you can see it from a higher perspective, and then we'll have a better understanding of why things work out the way they do sometimes.
Very, very well said. Much better than I could have done.
You have the son working on the farm.
There you go. Maybe yes, maybe no. So we have a very limited perspective we have 2 eyes, 2 ears, sometimes less than that. And we can't begin to see the reasons for certain things, or the potential results. But that is part of our goal as human beings and on our quest towards expanding our knowledge, our wisdom, our consciousness. Growing in consciousness means we'll be able to see causes and potential outcomes better than the average Joe can, the average G.I. Joe. So good karma and bad karma. Who are we to say what's good and what's bad? That's why karma just is. It's a natural reaction. So some people might have said, hey, your son that broke his arm, that was a good omen. He broke his arm because he didn't get recruited for the military. And then some people would say, oh, that's a terrible omen, or terrible. You're not going to have a son to help you with the crops anymore. So we just should not be judging at all. Some people would even say the broken arm is a pleasurable experience because it's causing safety and security for the family. Others would not agree with that. So karma just is. It's simply reactions to causes. Okay, so that's the first misconception about karma, that it's not good or bad, it's whatever we label it. Now remember, the human beings can create pain and suffering for ourselves by labeling something bad, which may turn out to be good in the future. That's the key point, and vice versa. We might label something good that turns out to be harmful in the future. So reserve judgment, like Terry said. The second misconception that we talk about in this chapter is that karma is not a system of rewards and punishments. So it's not being impinged upon us by an outside authority or regulated by an outside being. Nobody is up in the sky taking notes. Like, well, Santa Claus might be, but no one besides Santa Claus. Santa Claus knows, but so it's not. If we feel as though we're being punished, we need to look in the mirror. Now, it's a tough pill to swallow, very tough. This is one of the most challenging concepts in spiritual philosophy, but it does help us understand so much. All right, take a look in the mirror.
A lot of people like this idea of reward and punishment, especially when it pertains to other people. I want to see that person punished. I want to see him suffer for what he's done, especially if they've done something to me or to somebody I care about. There's a lot of that. I have to watch it all in myself. I sometimes find myself wishing, I hope he gets what's coming to him. So, on the other hand, when we see things that happen to ourselves, we have to say the same thing. Unless it's, somebody creating new karma, then it is my past karma working itself out. And so, obviously, there's something that I am responsible for that caused this. And maybe I can figure it out, maybe I can't. But the best thing I can do is to accept it and do the best I can and move forward. And try not to create new karma. That's our goal in this entire lesson. Learn, and it won't happen in this lifetime, but we can work towards it. A future goal of reaching the point where we create no new karma and we start working off all of the, what's the first type of karma? Sanchita.
Sanchita Karma.
And as Paul said, once we work out every last ounce of our past karma, we have no reason to reincarnate again. That doesn't mean we won't be working at something, and doesn't mean we will cease to exist. We will have other things to do, but we will not have to reincarnate in the human kingdom.
But what about unconditional love and all the good things, and we're supposed to do positive good things, doesn't that
create karma? Very good point. If it is selfish and emotional in nature, then it creates personal karma. If it is totally unconditional love, compassion, kindness, where I'm not expecting anything at all in return, that's not personal, it's not selfish. And so you're creating good karma for the entire human race. And it doesn't require coming back.
So let's assume this. I'm at the effect. I become aware. I'm at the effect of a cause. Something I chose, something I did. So in my awareness, I'm at that effect. Now another situation occurs because I'm in the moment. Something comes up. When something comes up, now I have to make a choice, right? As to how I'm going to behave, how I'm going to think. So the suggestion is if I think in a loving way, kind way, open to whatever, my karma I will then be at the next time, I'll be at the effect of my cause. My cause being that I was loving and kind and open.
Perhaps, or you will have just resolved that bit of Sanchita Karma.
Because we're always in a new situation, you know, from moment to moment. Cause and effect, cause and effect. So it never dies, does it? The cause and effect. And
if you're resolving the effect by being unconditional, correct, yeah. I would assume that there is an additional outpouring of unconditional energy that you'll then reap back from the universe, most likely. It's hard to say specifically with each situation. All we can say is operate with acceptance, non-attachment, non-judgment.
It takes a long period of time, a number of lifetimes to completely reach that point. We become a little more aware, a little more perceptive in each lifetime, and it requires a tremendous amount of effort to pay attention to that. But eventually we do get to the point where we have recognized it at all times. Steve had it.
This is a completely different understanding of what I thought conflict was. But anyway, part of the conflict I have with what you're saying is that you don't want new karma. So, but then I said, then is it karma negative? You don't want something. I mean, that common sense infers it must be a negative. So I don't know how you can say it's not negative, yet don't want it at the same time. I don't have a problem with that.
Okay. It's very similar to the things we say about ego, that once you reach a certain stage in awareness development, the ego no longer serves a good purpose and you start trying to diminish it. The same with karma and with desire, personal karma. Up until it's completely tied to your sense of self or ego, my identity. So it absolutely does serve a good purpose, whether it's negative or positive or whatever spin you want to put on it. It is absolutely necessary for your advancement. Nobody can advance without passing through all of those stages, whether they are pleasant or unpleasant. And to tell you the truth, a lot of people like those unpleasant experiences. They thrive on it. The anguish, the back and forth, the fighting, they love that. They can't imagine existing without it.
But they might not admit this.
No, they
usually won't admit that.
They may not. But it's absolutely necessary. It's something we all have to pass through. But once you reach a certain level of awareness and acceptance, that's how we approach it. Acceptance. We start paying more attention and we start recognizing it more quickly.
I'd like to add as well that pleasurable effects do need to be paid off and received, and that's a resolution of sorts to all of your good deeds, and that could be considered positive karma. So it's the reaction of all the good things that you do that needs to be paid back too, and that's why some people have beautiful lives and have seemingly no problems in certain parts of their lives, and they're just great, happy people. And we also talk about what happens after death when you spend a long period in Devachan or the heaven world. That's a payback for all the good that you've done in the life. So there certainly is a repercussion and a receiving back of all the good things that you do too. But that the unselfish, unconditionally motivated actions that you do don't bring you back into this karma chakra, the wheel of incarnation, over and over again. You coming down in the physical world is specifically to learn and to grow. And once you no longer do things that require your physical body to work out, then you won't need to come back anymore. The positive karma you can still experience that at different levels.
So the goal is not to get to the point where you don't have to come back anymore. The goal is to be in the moment and learn what you need to learn at this particular moment in time.
One foot in front of the other.
And I would imagine the moment that we feel fear is the awareness of, oh, I'm in my conditioned thinking. I'm in my ego. So that's like a signal to us.
That's one of them, yes.
One of them. What are the others?
Well, I can't.
Any jealousy, anger, annoyance,
which causes a sense
any
of fear,
emotion, really.
Yeah.
Any
really,
emotion.
yeah.
But the remedy for any of that is unconditional love, which we always say that we do things in we try our best to do things in a very loving, caring way, but unconditional love and true unconditional love, we don't really understand it. We've maybe seen glimpses of it in our lifetime,
Right.
and once you live in that state of constant unconditional love, when that is your permanent state, then that is when karma is not being generated anymore because of that. But we don't really understand what unconditional love is yet, and that is the journey past the karma. There's a quote where it says, I can't remember, I think it's a saint, Catholic saint, and he says, love and then do as you like. And that can be like misinterpreted for like what we recognize as love before unconditional love. So I think if we take that statement and really put unconditional love, or the idea of what we think it is, and place that there, then you can't take that the wrong way.
No, I think that's a good point. We talk about some of these qualities we're trying to develop, like unconditional love, and we have a very imprecise and very poor understanding of what it is at first. So we kind of throw it out there and we get a vague general idea of what it is. And periodically we revisit that and look at it and, oh, well, maybe I thought I was expressing unconditional love, but I realize now that it wasn't completely unconditional. So we reassess it periodically and revisit it. We do the best we can in the moment, and then we look at it again later.
All right, there's one more misconception about karma we want to bring up, and that's the idea of vicarious, or this is a fun word, substitutionary atonement. So there's also a concept known as a violet flame that we hear about in different spiritual circles. And these concepts that we're bringing up now are purported to be ways to eliminate karma without having to go through the processes that we're talking about to resolve it. So I hope that's clear. It's basically like, you know those big pink erasers from school? It's like erasing karma, figuring out a way to erase it without having to deal with it. We're being very, very direct here, but that's a misconception from this teaching about karma. It cannot be erased, bluntly speaking, unless we see the situation, come face to face with it, and deal with it.
But the most important part of that is we don't want it to be erased. Karma is absolutely essential for your further progress. If somebody could come along and erase all of your karma, you would be dead in the water. It's like a boat without a motor. You can't go anywhere because there's nothing impelling you. And without that push and pull, there's nothing really in life to keep you going.
Stated another way, it's almost like it's kind of a cheat. Think about if you attend a couple of days of your class and then you don't attend anymore, then you show up at the final exam and somehow you have the answers to the exam. And
Because somebody passed.
Someone passed you the answers and you took the test and you passed. All right, you got a diploma. Did you learn? Did you really learn? That's what we're talking about here. That's the exact thing we're talking about. If we erase our karma by chanting something or by doing something special, a special ritual or something, it's, who knows? We can't say for sure that it works or not, but we don't believe that it does because we didn't learn. You didn't learn the lessons that were presented.
And again, karma is not a personal reward or punishment. It's just nature's way of moving us along.
Right. Okay. Lots of big stuff we're talking about. It's so good. Should we keep going? Are there any comments? All right. The next section is karma as universal law. All right. Terry just mentioned this. The law that reorients us back to the path. So this concept requires an understanding of the evolution of the soul. And theosophy and yoga philosophy teach that our soul is on a path. And we as human beings are on a spiritual path. We're going somewhere. We're learning the lessons that this physical life has to offer until we don't need to learn them anymore, until we've graduated from Earth, basically. We've graduated from the school of life. So that's the path that we're talking about here. Now, we can get off track and get off our path. Karma is the law that knocks us over the head and kind of re-aims us back towards the road or towards the footpath. I've used the analogy before of those blow-up bumpers in the bowling alley gutters. You guys seen those ever? For beginners? So for kids who are learning, or for anyone who's learning, those blow-up bumpers, that's karma. So when you bowl the ball, if the ball is you rolling down the path of life and you hit the bumper, it kind of knocks you back into the middle. Hit the other side, knocks you kind of back. And that's karma does that. It kind of like hits us over the head with a sufferable situation, a painful or unpleasant situation in life. Ooh, I put my hand on the burner. Maybe I shouldn't do that. That's a quick, instant lesson that I learned. There can be harder lessons too. If you don't pay your taxes year after year, and then you go to try to buy a house, you're not going to be approved. That's a longer, slower lesson, but that can steer you back into the ethics of paying proper taxes. So that's another little thing. So lots of these little reminders of, hey, what to do to walk the spiritual path in a straight line to get to the goal and experience and learn as much as we can in the process.
And one of the things you started to allude to is the degree of correcting the path. Now, at first, it's kind of like a rap on the knuckles or on the head. It's like, hey, pay attention here. But if you ignore that and keep getting farther and farther off the path, it becomes more like a 2x4. And if you get far enough off the path, it's like the roof caves in on you. So the farther we get off of our path of going along with nature's way of doing things, the more drastic the correction becomes.
So speaking about the example I gave about not paying taxes, so a little knock on the head might be your loan officer, since I'm in real estate, your loan officer telling you you don't qualify for a house because you haven't been paying your fair share of taxes. That might be the gentle reminder, oh gosh, I better pay. But then what if that turns into tax evasion and hiding money and money laundering? Well, then your reminder might be jail time. So that's the 2x4.
Yeah, exactly.
And this can be applied to any area of life. And these concepts, spiritual growth is very practical. So all the things that we're talking about here are very practical. Paying taxes, don't cheat on exams, being honest, don't cheat on your spouse unless you have that special arrangement with your spouse, which some people do. Very practical. Everything we do has to do with our spiritual growth in life, according to these teachings. Now, of course, you might be someone who doesn't believe in that at all, and you're here to have fun. You're here in life, physical body, to live and enjoy and party, and that's cool too if that's your belief. This is one way to view life. You can compare notes at the end of life and see who made the most progress.
But you compared it to like it being similar to physics, right? And so when you said that, I pictured Newton's cradle. Is that what it's called? No, I don't.
Oh, you mean the balls?
Yeah. So it's like
the swinging.
The harder you hit it, right? The harder this is going to come out, and that would essentially be seen as. But it all makes sense in physics as well. And then you have like the what I would call the distributed karma in the middle, right? Like the balls that just look like they stay in one spot, but the energy does go through them.
Right.
And so that's, so if you wanted to describe it in physics, that's how like I pictured it in my mind.
That's
karma
very appropriate.
doing it, you know?
I like that. The middle ones
Yeah,
are the
that's
distributed. That is very, very good. But we can use that. We also like to use the ripples in the water. If you toss a pebble into the pond, the pebble is the action happening. The pebble falls in and it creates the ripples in all directions, affecting all the area around it. And then when the ripples hit the edge, they're still there and they do come back. The ripples very subtly, and they come. And they sometimes go back out again if you can perceive that vibration.
It's reaching, what is it? I just said the word. Homeostasis.
Yeah.
Right? That's harmony.
When the ripples
Yeah.
go,
It gets
dissipate.
back to that.
Mhm.
That's the law.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's all of those are very good examples.
Yeah. I like that. Okay. Back to the path. Karma is a natural system inherent in the universe. Okay. We hear of this concept of lords of karma sometimes. I've heard of that in different spiritual circles, that there are actual beings who are the ones that are taking notes and keeping track of the actions that we do, and they're the ones that figure out where you're going to be born for your next life and what you deserve and don't deserve, basically. So that actually should probably be discussed in the misconceptions section, because there, as far as we know, there isn't any entity keeping track. The lords of karma might be the adepts who have given us religions and our theosophical tradition, and the great yogis of the past, the ones who kind of are there behind the scenes giving humanity assistance and guiding. Those beings might be considered the actual lords of karma. And they're the ones, by the way, who have achieved that degree of advancement in their school of life, and they don't need to come back into physical bodies because they've learned and they've eliminated all their karma, so then they can give the assistance to humanity that's necessary.
I need to do some more research on that. I don't know exactly how the lords of karma interact with humanity, but they do exist. And before our next class, I'll try to remember to look up some information about that.
Cool. We can briefly mention here the Akashic Records. Some of you have heard of the Akashic Records. And that, actually, you should describe what that is, just briefly.
Well, the Akashic Records, again, is kind of a natural device. It's nature's way of recording events, but it doesn't record events so much as it records conscious interaction with events. In other words, if you experience something in life, it's not as if you're an alien watching a movie and just seeing things happen, and you have no understanding and no emotional connection or reaction to it. You, as a human being, have some kind of a reaction to it, or boredom even may be your reaction. But you do have some sort of emotional, mental reaction to whatever happens around you at all times. And it's that emotional, mental connection that is recorded, not a video tape. So in other words, if you could play it back, you would experience whatever emotions the persons involved felt and experienced. It wouldn't be you as an individual analyzing it as a movie, so to speak.
So it's not visually watching a play of activity on Earth. It's more like sensing, feeling it.
The adepts have that ability to go back in time if necessary. They don't do it for amusement purposes. But if they have need to go back in time and see the reasons for something that exists currently, they can do that by looking at the Akashic record that pertains to that situation, and then they can make that connection. I know there's a lot of stuff.
Is this similar to like what the Buddha talked about? Him being able to like go back and like see his like past life, like in meditation, he was able to. He was said to say that, like, go back and see, in a sense.
Yes, but except that it's not just your own past lifetimes. It would be any event in history, whatever. For example, HPB was shown and given the opportunity to use that in writing some of her articles in some of the books that she wrote. That is my overwhelming desire, is not for this lifetime, but in the future to develop the ability to see those Akashic records. As Paul and I have mentioned many times, we can't prove to you that reincarnation exists. We can't prove to you also that karma exists. We believe it does. We think that we have some indication that it exists, but neither we can prove that it exists, nor can we prove that it doesn't exist. So my desire is to, in some future lifetime, be able to do that same thing and be able to prove, at least to myself, whether I could prove it to anyone else is not that important. First, I have to be able to prove it to myself that it actually works, and why it works and how it works. I would love to be able to do that.
And by the way, the teaching of Patanjali and his Raja Yoga, his Yoga Sutras, teaches us how to go about raising our awareness to do this. The Akashic Records, if I'm not mistaken, exist on the astral plane, the astral emotional level, which is only a couple of dimensions, so to speak, more refined than our physical body. But Patanjali teaches us it's basically the process of true meditation, which is raising our consciousness from our physical brain to that of our higher self. And once we achieve that soul connection, that higher self consciousness, where we're actually aware of our soul, we will then be able to travel in the other realms or planes or dimensions and see these things and commune with our soul. And if we have the need, ethically of course, we could go back and view causes in past lives that are coming up now. Now, we believe that we would never be granted these kinds of siddhis or powers if we were going to be using them selfishly, only for a good reason, motive. But yes, Patanjali teaches us how to meditate, how to raise our awareness to do that. Only at the higher levels can we access these cool photo albums of all of life's past and our own soul's history.
And it isn't just out of curiosity. It's because this is such an important concept that at some point we do need to be able to prove it to ourselves that it actually works.
All right, the next section is modifying karma. So we made the point that in this teaching there is no such thing as a karmic eraser. However, we as conscious beings evolving are allowed to modify the effects of karma. Now, how can we do that? I love the example that John Algeo gives in the book. He talks about the Wright brothers modifying the law of gravity. It's very simple.
They didn't change the law of
gravity. They did not change it. They worked with it.
Yeah, exactly.
They worked with it to create they created tools and a system that changed the effects of the law. That's the key. They didn't change the law. Gravity still pushes down on the airplane's wing, but they created a way to create less air resistance on the top of the wing and more air resistance under the wing, so the plane can defy gravity. Gravity still exists, just like karma will still exist. But if we can find a way to modify the effect that we're going to, you got to be conscious to a certain degree to be able to first even see this, to see how this is possible. So how the heck can we modify karma then? If we know we can't get rid of it, how can we modify it? Oh, we have an answer.
No.
Oh.
Any answers for me, but you're going to get questions.
Okay.
Is karma same as infinity? I mean, cause, then the effect. If it's affecting something, that's going to affect something. It can just go into so many.
Well, that's what we were
Does it
saying.
ever get resolved?
That's what we were saying over here.
Does it?
You want to answer?
Or is that what keeps everything going, pushing it along?
If you're truly resolving it, yes, you'll resolve that piece of your Sanchita Karma. And then if you are resolving it in such a way that you're
so many other causes.
it would most likely be an unconditional cause that you're putting out into the universe.
I think this can be explained to some extent by being clear about personal karma and universal karma. As you point out accurately, everything that happens has an effect. But what we're talking about from an individual point of view is this personal karma that we create. Animals don't really create personal karma. They don't create karma that can carry over from one lifetime to another. They work because of instinct. They don't have these emotions that they hang on to like humans do. And so their karma works out very quickly. We humans hang on to stuff for long, long periods of time. But as we grow in awareness, we get to the point where we start letting go of that. And then we stop creating personal karma. We don't stop creating karma, but then it becomes universal karma and does not affect me individually as far as requiring me to come back to resolve it. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps. But I'd hate to be the guy that has to figure out all these karmas in which direction.
That's the cool thing, is the universe does it automatically. We don't need angels taking notes up in heaven, or Santa Claus even writing up lists. It all happens naturally in nature. It collects all of the information.
Let's talk about our karma, universal karma, collective karma, where we are all at collectively in terms of the globe and what's going on.
We're going to get to that. That's a particular part of our class.
It's coming.
It's coming.
It's coming.
Coming
coming soon to a theater near you. So the retribution or the effects are not always one for one with karma, and depending on your level of awareness or enlightenment, modifying the effect can be done by seeing clearly the situation and acting and just operating with it and willingly. The thought that comes to mind, and this actually has worked for me on multiple occasions, like if I know I'm speeding down the road, which I do on a regular basis, and I see I come around the corner and I see the bike cop with his radar pointed right at me, before he even puts the radar in his holster, I'm already pulled over before I get to him. And do you know how well that's worked for me? Yes, because I know I saw the situation. I'm like, there's no reason to fight this. I'm gonna just accept it. I pull over right before I even get to him. And usually, so it doesn't always work out to be a zero ticket, but it has certainly helped. So it's happened on multiple occasions. So that's an example where it's not always one for one. I don't have to receive the exact effect of the cause. A murderer, for example, it happens, won't always be murdered in the next life. It might be some other type of effect. And if that person has gained awareness in other areas, what if he or she were to create an outreach program for depression, for people who are at risk of becoming a murderer, and he helps hundreds of people rehabilitate themselves? Maybe that person is resolving his karma of murdering someone in the past life by doing that in this life. We're trying to find some examples of how it might awareness could modify the effect. So if that person was still fumbling around in life and a terrible guy or girl, and he might need to be murdered to receive the proper lesson or captured as a hostage, but it does not have to be that way. It doesn't have to be an eye for an eye, depending on our awareness.
There's another thing that we need to keep in mind at all times about karma. And that is when we look at a situation, at least I don't have the ability to perceive whether or not this is the leveling or the resolution of some past karma that these people are involved in, whether it's me or someone else, or if it's new karma that they are creating or that one of those people is creating. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but
Participating in someone else's karma, you mean?
yes, if someone gets into an abusive relationship, for example, is this something that's carried over from the past, or is this a new karma in the process of being created? I don't have that ability to look at it and say one way or the other. So for me, it's important not to make a judgment and to only step in if I think, I can help somehow resolve that situation. But I don't know if it came from the past or if this is something new.
That brings up a good point about interfering, though. Sometimes we need to be careful about that. We can try to help, and it's our responsibility when it comes to abuse and violence. It's our responsibility as humans to protect ourselves and to protect others if we can. But to what extent? We have to realize that sometimes situations need to be worked out by the people that are involved in it. And if we're clearly an outside force trying to just help and trying to force our wisdom and our solutions, the outside person always has the right solutions. It's not always helpful to them. They might have to, these individuals in the situation might have to go through it on their own. And that's where we have to practice the acceptance and the non-reaction.
Yes, and that's the important part. Do what you can to offer assistance or to offer advice, and then step back and not get sucked into the situation. It may be that you're actually making the situation worse. So do what you can, but practice non-attachment and non-reaction.
Making it worse or delaying the inevitable. I love that prayer that the Alcoholics Anonymous say. There's a section in it that talks about, grant me the ability to change what I can.
To accept the things I cannot change.
And to
wisdom to know the difference.
Yes, to change what I can.
Not giving anything away.
No, it's okay. To change what I can, accept what I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. Brilliant. Yes, it is so brilliant. And that's could be a mantra for everyone, for all of us in life. Yeah. The ability to, it's our responsibility too. As we grow in consciousness, we realize that we're more and more members of the same human family. The first chapter we did, or maybe it was the second chapter, it's called Universal Brotherhood. And that's a key feature, a key concept in theosophy, is that all life is part of the same family. So we always tend to, we don't always, but people forget that a lot. And change what I can, it's our responsibility. Okay. No new karma for adepts when humans first came on the scene. No karma at all. Well, let's go ahead and talk about distributive karma, since it's been brought up twice so far, unless there's something we want to talk about before distributive. No? So we sometimes refer to distributive karma as group karma. So Gene brought it up, and then we heard it again about our human karma in general. Well, karma can be viewed by group actions as much as personal actions. And groups, no matter how a group is defined, it could be a group of 2 people or a group of a nation of 60 million, United States, creates karma. Groups create karma. You've heard of the mob mentality, right? It's easier to do atrocious acts if everyone else is doing it, riots and things. So karma is created by multiple people as well. And it has to be resolved and paid back. That's a debt that needs to be paid back. And all of our thoughts, so how do we, the thought for, when a group of people, when lots of people have certain thoughts, the thought forms that are created become very, very strong and infused with more power, because the more brains and the more consciousnesses that are thinking them, the thought forms gain more power and then create even more influence on others. And it's like a cycle. And that has karma. That creates an action that needs to be solved. So many different groups have major, major thought karma going on. Racism against a certain race, the idea of war, the idea of two countries going against each other, different religious groups, any different group you can think of. Religions is a huge one. Terry always jokes about Boy Scout karma. Not that the Boy Scouts of America does anything wrong, but the Boy Scouts do generate their own fair amount of karma, any group. And each individual does participate in that based on the degree to which they identify with the group. So the Ku Klux Klan, for example, major karma, right? Now the leader of it would theoretically have more debt to pay versus someone who might have just been sitting in the office behind the computer. I don't know if they have that, if they have an office somewhere. But the person that's actually out there doing the work, so a greater degree of identification.
So, for example, if you're born into a certain religion, you participate in the group karma of that religion up until the point that you effectively leave it. If you consider yourself no longer a part of that religion, then you're not involved in the group karma anymore. So that's an example of one you're born into. So now you have the personal karma of having been born into that. That's personal karma. Once of being born into group karma, once you decide that you're no longer an individual who participates or believes in that religion, then you leave that karma behind. However, if you then join the Rotary Club, you now take on Rotary karma for yourself. And if you decide later that you're going to renounce your membership, then that's the end of it. Only as long as you are a participating or believing member of that group. Now, for example, we have male karma and we have female karma. So that's not going to change unless you decide to change gender, which can happen. And then you would be switching your group karma. So there are some that we can leave behind and there are some that we can't.
I got a question.
And we have some comments online too.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So it sounds like more like ignorance is when you don't know that something is maybe not the best karma and you're a part of a group because you're ignorant to it. Maybe you don't know, but at some point you might be enlightened. The light bulb goes on, and at that point you're held accountable, and the karma might it could change based on your knowledge or the enlightenment. Is that correct?
Most people don't leave it because they are enlightened enough to see that there's karma involved. It just doesn't resonate anymore. They don't feel like a part of that anymore. So it's more of an organic, natural reaction to it. So yes, it's about becoming more aware or changing your perceptions, but it's more like a natural instinct.
We have a couple online.
Just one real quick. It'd be like taking your own karma with you, but the group that you left behind will develop other karma outside of your own karma.
Exactly. Now, this is important to make the distinction. When you are creating individual karma, you can't get rid of that without resolving it yourself. When you are participating in group karma, you're responsible for a portion of that group karma only as long as you're a member of that group. Once you leave that group, that's the end of your participation. The karma, they have a bag of karma that will continue on with whoever happens to be a part of that group. An ethnic group will have a bag of karma that will continue until the last member of that ethnic group dies. And then that will be the end of the karma for that ethnic group.
Before we do that, if it's okay, we have a couple of online comments. Eugene from Costa Rica says, "Are we sometimes nothing more than a cog in the wheel of karma? Because of relationships or locational circumstance, can we be used to an effect of karma in action?" And then you were just talking about that. It says,
All right, read that again.
"Are we sometimes nothing more than a cog in the wheel of karma? Because of relationships or locational circumstances, can we be used to an effect of karma in action?" It was distributive karma, group karma, being born into a situation where you didn't necessarily choose it mentally in this life.
Well, again, it's the fact that our karma determines where we're going to be born, in what country, in what religion, in what ethnic group, in what family, etc., etc. So that places us somewhere. So in that sense, yes, we're just a cog in the wheel. And depending on whether we continue to accept that, and a lot of people do. A lot of people never move outside of the country they live in. A lot of people never change the religion they're born into. They keep all of their beliefs and ideas the same, pretty much, as what they're born into, the same political group sometimes that their parents belong to. They don't make any effort to change because it feels right for them. And that's fine. That's where they need to be. But sometimes as we grow out of these groups, and then we go out on our own. And that's the end of that group karma.
Yeah, it's a little sidebar, so maybe you could help me with this. A few times, one in particular, I was hired, self-professional stuff. I was hired as a therapist. And the reason why I was hired, I was told, is because I was a little bit unique about spiritual psychology, is what I was all about. And so they hired me. And we would have meetings, and I would look around the room and I'd say to myself, what am I doing here? You know, it always felt like I wasn't like everyone else. What am I doing here? Another time, now I'm teaching, and I'm a professor, and we're in a group like this, faculty group, and it's women's studies. It's the same thing. What am I doing here? Because I don't relate to anyone. I feel like I'm the only one that I'm not as liberal, I don't have the same ideas, and it's like I keep saying, what am I doing here? But nonetheless, I'm here. So obviously there are lessons for me, I guess, to learn, but it happens quite often. I have to pinch myself, and it's the strangest feeling. What am I doing here? I'm always that one man out. Like, what are you doing here? I don't know. What is that?
I
Do you understand what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Is that, so I'm trying to think, so there's a place for me somehow. They've chosen me somehow, and yet I don't have the collective karma that they have, it seems.
Well, that's why I think as we become more aware of how karma works, that we need to, whenever we get this feeling that we don't really belong to a certain group, need to leave it behind. It's, you obviously, you know, are beyond that, or were never a part of that, really. So to continue your involvement with it does nothing but create more karma for you and more stress, really. So if there's a group that no longer feels right for you, leave it. Go on to something else, and in your own mind during meditation, figure out where you really should be, that you can make more progress.
How do I get myself in these situations?
Well, a lot of it is just because we go with the flow, and you know, a friend is doing it, so we're going to do it. We need to become more individual and be willing to leave things behind when they no longer serve us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Be aware, analyze.
I do love it. I'm just different than all the rest.
You can probably understand when I talk that I came from the South. And I left there, And I came back to visit one time, and somebody said, "Why didn't you join the Ku Klux Klan?" And I thought, and then my response was, "Why would I ever consider joining the Ku Klux Klan?" And that shut them right down. So I guess I missed that karma.
Yeah. Do you think maybe a situation such as yours, you're there to teach them
Maybe.
a new way?
Yes, that comes up for me. But yeah.
But you need to teach them and back off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You
teach
gotta
them in the
back
way in
off.
which I can do it creatively, for sure. Because we don't often have these meetings, but so it must mean I've concluded that that is my purpose. Because I'm not like everyone else. And so they're teaching the way everybody else teaches, but I have a different message.
It's also
It's not
important to
always
make
easy.
sure that you feel a connection, though, too. Don't spend your valuable energy if you don't really feel a draw to it or a connection. You're sensitive enough with your own dharma, your own path, to know if this is where you should be spending your energy. We only have a limited amount. And if you don't feel a connection, this is what Terry was saying about people who just stay in the same job and stay in the same religion just because that's. But look at it like if you feel that you could be more effective elsewhere, we should do that.
But it sometimes
I think I'm in my right place.
Good.
Sometimes it requires more energy to make that change, and it's easier just to go with the flow and not create any ripples.
We just have 2 more minutes left before this one is over. We covered a lot of material in this one.
Yeah.
Anything that we can flesh out even more? We got to go half the chapter.
I just wanted to say about
Sure.
distributive karma.
Yeah.
I think about this all the time. You guys are talking about like groups, and like that's easier to see, right, when you choose a religion or when you choose. But how about just living in everyday life, right? So we get things that tell us how we should live a certain way, especially here nowadays with commercials and all that stuff. So let's talk about how this plastic cup is creating karma for me, right? Like the average time that somebody spends with this is 13 minutes, and then it takes 500 years to go away, right? So that is distributive karma that's harder to see because it's all around us all the time. And so I think that's a lot of the challenges that we are facing nowadays with environmental issues or with just anything, like with people getting along and all that stuff, is not so much like a religion or being racist or being like all those things. It's much simpler than that. There's small things that we do every day that are, because this is essentially I know that I shouldn't be using single-use plastic, but I do it anyway, and that's more
And-
subtle, but it's there.
Right, and you're right. This is part of our group karma. We have group karma as the human kingdom. The entire human kingdom, we all participate in that group karma. And we will only leave that behind when we have graduated from the human kingdom. And everyone else will continue to share that karma. I want to point out before we end just one last.
Can I make one more comment on
Yeah,
James?
sure.
Conscious living is a huge piece to this evolution this path that we're walking. Conscious living, being aware of everything, and the details are so important. We talk about this. We can't gloss over any details in our life. So the fact that you're concerned about the plastic cup that you spend 13 minutes with, and then it takes 500 years that the earth has to spend with it, that's an awareness. You've just learned something, and you're now aware of that. And at some point, you'll probably make a change. And there will be personal karma, not necessarily group karma from that, but it's not huge. It's not huge because you're still living a good life. But conscious living is a huge piece to putting one foot in front of the other and walking towards the path to enlightenment.
Yeah. Just one last thought to be thinking about during the next couple of weeks. And that is that once you are absolutely convinced of the truth that karma is a natural law, you will never, ever be tempted to try to thwart it. You'll never think, oh, well, I can steal this or, take this from somebody and I'll get away with it, because you know in your heart that isn't going to happen. So that removes all temptation to do anything that would even possibly harm another individual. That would be the end of it. So that's one thing that we would aim for. I would hope that we would be able to at least convince ourselves of the truth that karma exists, so that we wouldn't even be tempted to try to go against it.
And if somebody cuts you off driving,
Bless
let
them.
it go.
Don't speed in front of them and slam on the brakes.
Is there anything else online?
Marianne Deem says, hi, Terry.
Oh, hi, Mary.
I think that's it for now, everyone. You guys are wonderful. Thank you for all the participation. It's 4:03. We're going to sign off. Yeah. Thank you.
In 2 weeks is Labor Day. Are you?
Oh, it's 2 weeks Labor Day?
Well,
The 2nd of September?
Yes, the 2nd of September. It's Labor
Oh,
Day.
yeah.
Are we gonna meet or?
Well, what do you think? What do all of you think? Do you have Labor Day picnics planned?
I'm good. I'm good because I'm at the week after.
What do you think?
Ready to
Labor
sleep first.
I'll be here.
I'm available.
I guess we can decide. We'll sleep on it. We'll decide. I'll send an email.